Flight attendant shoves black woman CEO. One call later, she shuts down the whole airline. They pushed her out of first class because they assumed she didn't belong. No name check, no scan of her status card. Just one look, and that was enough for a flight attendant to lay hands on her, force her off the plane, all while 50 passengers sat silent, and a little girl quietly recorded everything from her seat. They thought she was just another passenger in the wrong place. A black woman in a suit, too sharp to be real. But what they didn't know was that she was Avery Linton, the founder of Linton Aerotech, a tech billionaire and the silent force behind nearly 9% of the parent company that owned the airline. She wasn't mistaken, she was dismissed. And that moment, that push, it didn't humiliate her. It gave her a reason to burn the whole system down. The story you're about to see isn't just about bias. It's about a battle, one that will force an entire industry to change forever. If you've ever been underestimated because of how you look, if you've ever been told you didn't belong, keep watching. Because this story might be yours too. The air inside JFK Terminal 4 was cool, sterile, and humming with the low murmur of pre-boarding routines. Gate A23 displayed Skylink's Flight 227 to San Francisco, boarding first class now. Avery Linton approached the jet bridge in a sharp navy suit, heels silent on polished tile, her boarding pass and executive sapphire card in hand. She'd done this exact routine dozens of times before, always in the same efficient rhythm. Walk tall, speak little, glide past assumptions like they were air turbulence. But today, something cracked. She offered the documents to the gate agent with her usual composed nod. The woman scanned them, blinked once, and waved her through with a forced smile. Avery felt the moment hang, but she kept moving. The cabin air on the aircraft smelled faintly of citrus and pressurized luxury. She stowed her carry-on overhead, settled into seat 1A, and began reviewing the revised investor deck on her tablet. The pitch in San Francisco would finalize a $600 million zero-cents climate tech merger. Everything needed to be precise. She didn't even look up when the flight attendant approached, until the voice made her do so. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to see your boarding pass again," said the blonde woman in uniform, her tone brisk, officious. Avery calmly held up the pass. "This isn't our standard first-class FAMAC," the attendant frowned. "It was printed at the counter." "Their system was down," Avery replied, as if that explained everything. "Because it did, but it didn't seem to be enough." "I'll need you to step off so we can verify," the woman insisted, her hand hovering too close to Avery's arm. "We're trying to avoid delays." Avery's jaw flexed slightly. "I've already verified at the gate, twice." The woman didn't blink. "We can't proceed with inconsistencies." Avery stood slowly, not a word more. No scene, just precision and power in motion. She turned to retrieve her tablet when the attendant reached forward, not to assist, but to apply pressure. She grabbed Avery's elbow, subtle but firm, and pushed. Not shoved violently, but pushed just enough to make it clear this was her domain and Avery. A silence rippled through first class. A few glanced over their newspapers. A man in 1B, silver-haired and suited, shifted away as if contagious discomfort had brushed his seat. No one said a word, except for one voice from 2 rows back. "Mom, is she in trouble?" 11-year-old Kayla whispered, her phone camera already up. Her mother gently shushed her, but didn't stop her from filming. Kayla had an eye for moments, and something about this one didn't sit right. The camera caught it all. The exchange, the push, the stiff dignity on Avery's face. The moment her gaze froze the attendant with a look that said, "You have no idea what you just did." Avery walked off the plane, back down the jet bridge, not looking back. Once inside the terminal, she stopped just past the window that gave a view of the aircraft. Her hands were steady as she took out her phone. She made one call, no assistants, no intermediaries, just one number, burned into her memory. "It's me," she said when the line picked up. "Activate Indigo Protocol, immediate, all chapel." There was a pause, then a clipped response. "Confirmed. Are you certain?" "More than ever." Avery replied and ended the call. She stood there a moment longer, back straight, eyes burning with a restrained fury that didn't need an audience. At that exact moment, back on board, the little girl's video finished uploading to her social media account with the caption, "They kicked this black lady out of first class. Guess who she really is? Guess while black, the sky's line." The spark was lit, and less than 3 hours later, it was a digital wildfire. The video had reached 2.6 million views by evening. Comments flooded in outrage, disbelief, comparisons to past incidents, calls for boycott. Activists amplified it. Public figures quoted it. But what stunned everyone wasn't the humiliation, it was the reveal. By midnight, someone on Twitter connected the dots. Wait, is this Avery Linton from Linton Aerotech? A viral thread broke down her biography. Former prodigy, Harvard engineer, founder of the company providing AI infrastructure to dozens of airlines including Skylinx's parent company, Avalon Group. The woman they pushed wasn't just in first class. She owned the runway. And in the span of one boarding mishap and one silent push, Skylinx had just handed their largest hidden stakeholder the one thing she never asked for: a public reason to dismantle them from the inside out. This wasn't over. This hadn't even begun. The terminal lights flickered faintly above Avery as she stood near the window, the plane still visible beyond the glass, like a symbol mocking her composure. She didn't cry. She didn't shake. She simply stared, the past roaring back in images and voices so vivid they blurred with the hum of the airport's sterile rhythm. It wasn't the first time she'd been told without being told. She was 10 the first time it cut this deep. The school trip to the Georgia Science and Technology Museum had been all she could talk about for weeks. Her mother had packed her favorite notebook and saved every spare dollar to cover the cost. The morning of the trip, Avery showed up an hour early, standing beside her classmates with wide eyes and a backpack too heavy for her small shoulders. She remembered holding her permission slip so tightly it had folded into soft creases. Mrs. Dillard, the field trip coordinator, pulled her aside with the same strained smile the flight attendant had used just hours ago. "Avery, sweetheart," she'd said gently, her voice soaked in syrupy condescension. "We had to rebalance the groups. The museum asked us to make sure each one was representative. And we already have Tasha in Group B." Avery blinked. "You mean there's only one black kid allowed per group?" "Of course not," the teacher answered too quickly. "But we need to follow the guidelines." So instead of riding on the school bus with her friends, she went home in silence, notebook untouched, dreams delayed by one unspoken rule. People like her were always the exception, never the standard. That same night, her mother held her close while Avery whispered what happened. Maya Linton didn't scream or storm the school like other parents might. Instead, she walked Avery to the window, pointed to the sky and said, "One day, you'll build your own museum, your own bus, and you'll write the rules." The voice of her mother, gone now 5 years, still louder than any corporate boardroom or investor pitch ever could. And then there was Hazel, not just a mentor but a second mother, one who found Avery at age 15 fixing vending machines at her uncle's garage and handed her a broken drone with a challenge: fix it and fly it, or walk away and forget you ever touched it. Avery didn't walk away. Hazel was an aerospace legend, retired Air Force MIT alum, and the first black woman to lead propulsion systems at Orion Aerospace. She taught Avery that intelligence was nothing without precision, and power meant nothing if it didn't serve purpose. Learn to build the damn engine. Hazel died before she could see the IPO. But her words, like her mother's, lived in Avery's chest like coiled thunder. And now, watching her reflection in the airport window, same sharp suit, same unbothered gaze, Avery could almost hear both voices overlapping. "This is the real test," Maya whispered in her mind. She closed her eyes and saw them, not as memories but as presence, felt them standing beside her. Their lives had been spent demanding access. Hers would be spent creating it. She took a breath and tapped her screen. No PR team, no damage control, not yet. She called 2 people, one in Zurich, the other in Seoul. "It's time," she said to both. "Activate Project Ironbird." The code name wasn't arbitrary. Ironbird was the name of her mother's first beat-up Buick, the one she used to drive Avery to science fairs across the South. Now it was the name for an intelligence operation she'd been quietly building for years. An AI-powered audit system designed to detect patterns of institutional bias in aviation data, hiring, customer service, security checks, seating algorithms. It had been shelved for political reasons. No one in the industry wanted that level of transparency. But now she had a reason and a spotlight. She moved through the terminal with calm precision, her every step echoing that of the girl dying a seat on the museum bus. She wasn't looking for revenge, she was executing a plan. This was strategy, not outrage. She didn't want an apology, she wanted exposure. She didn't want headlines, she wanted hearings. Her phone buzzed. An alert. The little girl's video had surpassed 4.2 million views. Comments were now in the tens of thousands. Someone had posted side-by-side photos, one of her boarding the flight, the other of her giving a TED Talk on algorithmic accountability. The caption read, "They pushed out the woman who literally wrote the code they're using." She allowed herself one small exhale. Not of relief, but readiness. This wasn't about one flight, it was about every closed door, every extra screening, every sideways glance masked as procedure. She looked up again at the aircraft just beginning to taxi. A storm was coming, and she was done flying at someone else's altitude. But while Avery moved through the terminal with quiet fire in her steps and a plan already in motion, somewhere behind the headlines, another woman sat in silence, one who wore the same uniform that had sparked it all. Becca Shaw stared at the glow of her phone in the darkened crew lounge, the world outside erupting, while inside her chest something heavier than fear stirred. She had done this route 100 times, JFK to San Francisco, always first class, always polished, always professional. But today, her hands wouldn't stop trembling. She replayed the moment again and again. The firm grip on the passenger's arm, the look in her eyes, the sense that something had just shifted in the world and wouldn't shift back. "I followed protocol," she kept repeating in her mind, but protocol was never what it was really about. Becca knew that. Because she hadn't always worn the uniform, she used to be the girl on the other side of it, the one stopped for random bag checks. The one told to wait, to explain, to prove. "I used to be the girl they flagged," she whispered to no one. "And now I'm the woman writing the flags." She hadn't set out to become that person. Years ago, she was just trying to survive. A single mother working double shifts, climbing from cleaning crews to cabin crew, memorizing every smile, every script, every silent rule no one says but everyone followed. The job had been her lifeline, but it had come at a price. Somewhere along the way, Becca stopped noticing who she looked through. Until yesterday. Until Avery Linton. She hadn't known who she was, just a black woman in a power suit, asking for the kind of dignity Becca had once begged for herself. And when she'd placed her hand on her, something cracked. Not just in Avery, but in her. Because at that moment, she wasn't just protecting procedure, she was protecting a system that had never protected her. And worse, she had passed its weight to someone else. Her phone buzzed. It was her daughter, Emily. 6th grade, full of questions and too smart to ignore the world. The message was just a photo, a classroom poster for Diversity Week. Emily had written in pink marker, "Don't judge someone by their seat, ask them about their story." And beneath it, a drawing of her teacher, Miss Harris, tall, black, warm-eyed, the one Emily always said reminded her of someone strong. Becca stared at the screen until her eyes burned. That night, Emily looked up from her homework and asked, "Mom, do you not like people who look like Miss Harris?" The words hit harder than any news headline ever could. "No," Becca managed. "I made a mistake." She didn't sleep, she couldn't. Somewhere between shame and reckoning, she started Googling. Avery Linton. The name pulled up more than scandal. It pulled up speeches, inventions, scholarships, global initiatives, images of a woman who had built power not to protect herself, but to open doors for others. One photo stopped Becca cold. Avery as a teenager, holding a hand-built drone, surrounded by trophies, smiling like no one could take her sky away again. That girl looked like Emily. And in that moment, something in Becca broke and reformed. She didn't know what she would do yet, but she knew the silence couldn't continue. And while her phone buzzed again with a call from Skylink's legal team, another name surfaced in her thoughts, one she hadn't dared say aloud. Imani Chase, Chief of Staff at Linton Aerotech. Becca reached for a pen and scratched a note across the back of a napkin. It was short, just a sentence, "I need to talk," off the record, but she hadn't sent it yet. Because if she did, there'd be no turning back. And what Becca didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that Avery's next move had already pulled in forces far beyond a single airline. Forces that were about to expose something far uglier than a push. Becca Shaw hadn't sent the message yet, but the current had already shifted. While she hesitated with a napkin and a name, Avery Linton was already 10 steps ahead, because hesitation wasn't a luxury she'd ever been afforded. Hours after the incident, she sat alone in her private office on the 46th floor of Linton Tower. She hadn't turned on the lights. The silence helped her think, helped her remember the voices of two women who no longer walked this earth but still guided every move she made. "This is the real test," her mother had said in that dream. "Don't just fly the plane, own the airspace," Hazel had once told her with a smirk. She opened a secure channel and began dialing numbers from memory. No titles, no intermediaries. The first voice was low and clipped, unmistakably British. "Ironbird Protocol?" asked Rowan, her London-based investor and silent stakeholder in 3 of the top 5 aerospace innovation funds globally. "Yes," Avery said, "full throttle. I'll handle the fallout." The second call connected to Seoul. A woman answered in Korean and said in English, "You're calling earlier than I expected. Time to recalibrate the system." The third call was the one that required the most precision. She sent a secure ping through a private server known to only 4 people on the planet. The reply came back seconds later. A video call window blinked to life. A man in his 30s with wild red hair and mismatched glasses leaned back in a worn leather chair, flanked by 6 computer monitors and a rack of servers glowing like city lights at midnight. Well, Jude said. "I was wondering when the bat signal would go up." "I need a clean line into Skylink's back-end architecture," she said, wasting no time. "You'll have it in 36 hours, Jude replied. "Do you know what I charge for this level of digital seduction?" "Do it pro bono," she said, holding his gaze. "Or I call in that favor you owe me from Geneva." Jude raised a brow, then grinned. "Damn, fine, I'll light the match." Thus the Ironbird Collective was activated, a network of legal strategists, data scientists, policy advisors, and silent capital partners Avery had built over the past 4 years for a moment just like this. Not a tantrum, not a press stunt, a plan. The first findings came faster than she expected. Jude's voice crackled through a secure line less than 2 days later. "You're going to want to sit down for this," he said, scrolling through code streams as he spoke. "Skylinks is running a proprietary passenger management system under the codename Falcon Eye. And it's not just about logistics." "How bad is it?" Avery asked. "It cross-references flight rosters with passenger names, purchase history, TSA screening patterns, and get this, zip code demographic. Then, it assigns a risk score based on subjective criteria, labeled behavioral profiling flags." "Are you telling me their system racially profiles passengers using name patterns and where they live?" "Not overtly," Jude replied. "But let's just say this. Statistically, names like Avery Linton score 2 levels higher on the discrepancy index than Claire Montgomery. And here's the kicker. They use these scores to trigger random seat downgrades, extra screening, and alternate gate routing." Avery closed her eyes, fury pressing against her ribs like a scream she refused to let out. "Is there more?" Jude hesitated. "There's a buried training module in their onboarding system. You're gonna love this." He sent over a screenshot from an internal PowerPoint file. Slide 37. Title, Cabin Comfort, Managing Expectations. Subtitle, Likely to Escalate. Bullet points listed. Overdressed travelers without status indicators. Passengers requesting executive amenities without prompt. Individuals appearing disoriented or overconfident in premium cabins. The images used for reference, all were people of color. Asian men, Black women, South Asian families. They're teaching flight staff how to smile and profile at the same time, Jude muttered. Avery scrolled down. At the bottom of the slide was the phrase, maintain calm professionalism. Never overserve the unpredictable. She stared at that sentence until the words blurred. She remembered pitching Skylinks a bias-mitigating AI system 3 years ago, one she and her team had spent months building. A system that used machine learning to cancel out discriminatory inputs in customer interaction logs, replacing pattern bias with behavior-based logic. Skylinks had rejected it. She still remembered the line from their executive feedback. Culturally interesting, but not aligned with our customer inputs model. And now she saw what their model really was. How deep does this go? She asked quietly. They've coded the system to adapt over time, Jude said. Even if they get caught, they'll claim it was a rogue algorithm. A glitch. Blame the tech. But tech doesn't write policy, she replied. People do. She rose from her chair and moved to the whiteboard across the room. She didn't write numbers, she wrote names. Tactics in the Senate. Airline unions, aviation watchdog groups, attorneys who owed her favors, journalists she trusted. She didn't need outrage. She needed evidence, pressure, leverage, truth. She needed to dismantle the rot from inside the machine. That night she drafted a briefing packet labeled Operation Equilibrium. She gave copies to 2 people, her chief of staff, Imani Chase, and her legal counsel, Rennell Waters. "A-leaks," she said. "We move when we're ready, not when they panic." Imani nodded, her face taut with quiet fire. "If this is what they've been hiding, we're going to need every tool." "Then let's sharpen them," Avery replied. But what none of them knew, what even Jude hadn't uncovered yet, was that one of those tools had already been compromised. Someone inside Linton Tower was feeding intel to Sky. And the next breach wouldn't be digital. It would be personal. But just as Avery began assembling her weapons of truth, she didn't realize one of them had already been turned against her. The breach wasn't in the code, it was in the room. A week after Operation Equilibrium began its quiet circulation, a confidential briefing memo was leaked. Not to the press, not even to Skylinks. It ended up in the hands of Avalon Holdings' legal team, the parent company of the airline, and they knew exactly what they were looking for. The leak wasn't an accident. It was a message. And the person who sent it, Elliot Marks, her mentor, the man who'd once written her recommendation to Harvard, the one who told her the day she closed her first funding round, "You won't just break ceilings, kid. You'll rewire the whole building." He'd also been on the board of Avalon Holdings for 12 years. He had stood and clapped when Avery was invited to join the advisory council of the Asian Futures Council. And now he had quietly slipped a file marked private for internal strategy use only to a firm whose history of discriminatory practices was under congressional watch. It was Rennell who brought the evidence to her office. He didn't speak at first, just slid a folder across the table. She opened it and recognized the language instantly. Phrases she had personally written, formatting that matched her own strategic shorthand. And then a timestamp. It had been downloaded on a Sunday afternoon, logged into their document server under a temporary access key. That key had been granted to Elliot. "We double confirmed with IT," Rennell said, voice low. "This was him. I'm sorry." Avery didn't speak. She sat back, the leather of her chair creaking in a room gone suddenly too still. There was no rage, not yet, just a silence that built like pressure in a sealed cabin. She had trusted him, and he hadn't just betrayed her, he had endangered the entire operation, given ammunition to the very people she was trying to hold accountable. "Find out what else he accessed," she said quietly. "And who else might be connected." "Already on it," Rennell said, then hesitated. "There's something else." He handed her a smaller envelope. It was hand draft, child's handwriting. She opened it and unfolded the loose leaf page. It was written in pink and purple ink, a little uneven, with hearts drawn in the margins. "Dear Miss Avery, my name is Jasmine. I'm the girl who filmed the video on the plane. I'm 11. I didn't know who you were, but I knew what they did was wrong. My teacher said you're trying to make flying fair for everybody. I think that's really brave. I hope I can be like you when I grow up. My mom said they don't listen to kids, but I wanted to try. Please don't stop. Love, Jasmine. The envelope also included a crayon drawing, Avery in a blue suit, standing in front of a plane with the words, "Let her fly," written in a rainbow across the top. Avery didn't mean to cry. It caught her off guard. One tear slipped past her guardrails, then another. It wasn't the image of Avery crying that stunned her. It was how still she remained while doing it, like someone who knew how to fall quietly, without breaking. Avery wiped her cheek with the back of her hand. Get in touch with Jasmine's mother. I want to thank her, and I want to give that little girl a front row seat at the hearings. You're thinking of going public? Imani asked. Not yet, Avery said. But when I do, I want it to be clear who I'm doing this for. That same night, Jasmine's letter was anonymously uploaded by a teacher who had seen it pinned to a classroom wall. Within hours, it was trending under the hashtag Jasmine Law, accompanied by stories of other children of color who had faced silent bias while flying. The narrative was no longer just about a powerful woman being wronged. It had become about every passenger who had been made to feel like they didn't belong at 30,000 feet. And while Jasmine's rainbow lettering warmed the internet, Avery slipped into a private back room of a restaurant in Brooklyn's Cobble Hill neighborhood. She didn't advertise the meeting. No security details, just Imani, Rinell, and a few people whose names never made headlines, but whose money, connections, and legal acumen had quietly reshaped entire industries. The air was thick with heat and low jazz, the clink of glasses muffled by thick brick walls. This isn't a war room, Avery began. This is a surgical table, and we're not here to wound, we're here to extract. She laid out the Falcon Eye data, the training slides, and a timeline of discriminatory practices cross-referenced with customer complaints and demographic flight logs. The algorithm isn't the crime, she said. It's the confession. They talked for hours. Strategy, media timing, potential whistleblowers, coordinated resignations. At one point, someone asked her what she'd do if Avalon retaliated. She answered without blinking. Then we dig deeper. We don't flinch. We let them show their teeth. The more they bite, the more they bleed. But as they adjourned and her team drifted out into the night, Imani remained behind. You've never looked shaken before, she said softly. I'm not shaken, Avery replied. I'm just... Elliot was family, Imani said. He was history, Avery corrected. But Jasmine, that little girl, is the future. They stepped out into the humid Brooklyn air together, the weight of the moment pressing against Avery's back like a familiar pressure she'd long since learned to stand against. But as the car pulled up, Imani's phone buzzed. One word flashed across the screen from their cybersecurity team. Intercepted. The message file wasn't theirs. Someone else had been watching. And this time, it wasn't just data they were after. The warning from cybersecurity hit just as Avery stepped into her car. Intercepted. Someone had been watching, tracking their private strategy sessions, maybe even listening. It confirmed what she already suspected. This wasn't a battle anymore. If a siege, and if the walls were already breached, there was only one thing left to do. That week, she contacted Congresswoman Elena Rivas Gutierrez, chair of the Transportation Oversight Subcommittee, who had quietly been tracking similar complaints for over a year. Rivas didn't ask for proof, she just asked, "How far are you willing to go?" To the end, by the following Monday, a press release landed on every major political and business wire in the country. Public hearings on discriminatory practices in commercial aviation to begin, informally dubbed the altitude hearings. The name stuck. On the morning of the hearing, the Capitol Hill Rotunda buzzed with an energy rarely seen outside of national scandal. Cameras rolled. Protesters gathered. Supporters held signs that read, "Let her fly," and "Bias has a boarding pass." Avery walked into the hearing chamber in a black tailored suit, her expression unshakable, her mother's old silver pin fastened above her heart. She wasn't just testifying, she was making history. But she wasn't alone. The second witness of the day was someone no one expected. Captain Naomi Park, a Korean-American pilot with 25 years in the cockpit, had never spoken publicly about her experiences. Today she did. Her voice didn't tremble, but her hands did, as she recounted the night she was forced to make an emergency landing during a lightning storm over Denver. "I was calm, trained, prepared," she said, "but when I stepped out of the cockpit after saving 143 lives, a passenger asked the flight attendant if the real pilot could come speak to them. I was still holding the controls when he said it." A murmur passed through the chamber. "But I stayed quiet," Naomi continued, "because in this industry silence feels safer than the spotlight. Until today." She paused, then added with a steady breath, "What we're dealing with isn't just an act of discrimination, it's a system designed to perpetuate it. This is about behavior. This is about belief." The statement would headline every news outlet that night. But just as momentum shifted in Avery's favor, the blow landed. A major news network released an exclusive exposé hours later. The untold past of Avery Linton. It rehashed every personal challenge she had faced. A brief marriage in her 20s to a hedge fund manager later convicted of fraud, a 2014 business failure that lost investors millions, an old legal dispute with a university over proprietary tech. It was sensationalized, full of omissions, and clearly orchestrated. But for the public, even fiction stings if dressed in just enough fact. "They're trying to reframe you," Ronell told her as they watched the media storm unfold. "You're not a threat anymore, you're a character, a villain, an unstable woman who got lucky and now wants revenge." Avery didn't flinch. Instead, she walked into her study, opened a cedar keepsake box, and pulled out a letter. It was folded carefully inside a pressed envelope, the handwriting faded but elegant. Her mother's final note to her, written days before she passed. Avery read it aloud at the next hearing session. No cameras, no theatrics, just her voice. "Baby girl. One day they'll try to rewrite your story. Tell it like they discovered you, like they rescued you from something. Don't let them. You were always the author, and if the world forgets who you are, remind them in ink, not volume. In truth, not rage. You are mine, and you are more than they'll ever be ready for." When she finished, the room was silent. Some staffers had tears in their eyes. Even the skeptical senators seemed to sit straighter. The smear campaign lost momentum within hours. Journalists began asking real questions. Why did Skylinks reject Linton's AI proposal despite its proven performance in bias mitigation? Why were internal cabin training materials scrubbed from the company's official site just days before the hearings? Why had no whistleblower protections been in place for the employees who tried to report anomalies in Falcon Eye? The pressure mounted. Within 72 hours, two high-ranking executives at Avalon resigned. One issued a vague statement about personal growth, the other disappeared completely. Avery didn't chase them. She stayed focused on the system. Because this had never been about revenge, it was about repair. And repair didn't come from tearing things down alone. It came from showing what should have been built in the first place. By the end of the week, Congress had subpoenaed Skylinks' internal algorithm logs. The Justice Department quietly opened an inquiry. Airline unions began drafting new anti-bias protocols based on Avery's model. And across the country, passengers of color began sharing their own stories, using the tag Altitude Justice. But as the hearings drew toward their final session, something unexpected happened. Jasmine's letter had made its way into the official record, and with it came a petition. Jasmine's Law, a proposed federal mandate requiring algorithmic transparency and bias training across all major transportation providers. Over 1.2 million signatures in 5 days. Jasmine, the little girl with the camera and the courage to press post, had changed more than just a flight. She had ignited a movement, and that movement was no longer just looking at airlines. It was looking at every system that quietly punished people for daring to show up in spaces they weren't expected to occupy. But just as the winds seemed to shift in Avery's favor, Imani stepped into her office one evening with a look that froze everything. "We have a problem," she said. "Big?" Avery asked. "It's not legal. It's not public. It's personal. And it's coming from someone we didn't expect." Avery blinked, her voice low. "Who?" Imani exhaled. "Becca Shaw. She just requested a private meeting. With you." Avery didn't say yes to Becca's request right away. She sat with it for a full day, weighing what it meant for the mission, for the movement, for herself. But something in Jasmine's letter, in Naomi Park's trembling hands, in her mother's words, reminded her, growth isn't proven in victory. It's proven in how we handle the gray space after harm. So she agreed. The meeting took place in a quiet conference room on the top floor of the Justice Equity Alliance, one of the nonprofits now working alongside Congress to drag Jasmine's law. Becca arrived without a lawyer, without makeup, without the mask of uniformed professionalism. Her eyes were tired, her voice was steady. "I'm not here to clear my name," she said. "I'm here because my daughter asked me who I really was. And I didn't have a good answer." She placed a folder on the table. "These are Skylink's training materials, the real ones, not the cleaned-up versions. Emails, chats, a thumb drive. I kept copies. I didn't know what for until now." Avery didn't speak. She opened the folder. Inside were slides with coded phrases, Farango Delta Alert, Visual Comfort Management. Every phrase was a dog whistle dressed in HR language. Every slide a wound with a timestamp. "They trained me to doubt people like you," Becca said, "and I let them do it. Because I was afraid." Avery looked up. "Why now?" Becca hesitated. "Because you didn't flinch when they came after you. You told the truth anyway. And because I don't want my daughter growing up thinking silence is safety." Avery stood slowly. She reached across the table, not to shake hands, but to pull the envelope closer. "I'm not here for apologies," she said. "But if you're ready to walk through the fire with me, there's work to be done." What followed was quiet but seismic. Becca's evidence was submitted under whistleblower protection. It became the smoking gun that led to criminal indictments, sweeping policy changes, and the final shutdown of Falcon Eye. Within 6 months, Jasmine's law passed with bipartisan support. A national AI ethics oversight board was established. Airline CEOs were subpoenaed, and for the first time in aviation history, anti-bias training became mandatory and enforceable. But Avery didn't stop there. She launched Altitude Equity, a venture incubator for transportation tech led by marginalized founders. Naomi Park became its first leadership fellow. Jude was appointed to the Federal Advisory Panel on Algorithmic Ethics. Becca, quietly, began training new airline staff, not to forget what had happened, but to prevent it from repeating. As for Jasmine, she became the face of a movement she never meant to start. She toured with her mother to schools, civic events, even Congress, reading her letter aloud with a smile that had once changed the course of an entire industry. On the 1-year anniversary of the flight, Avery stood once again at JFK, this time at a new terminal. One built from the ground up by New Altitude, the equity-first airline born from everything that tried to break her. She stood at Gate 1A, where it all began, and greeted the first group of passengers boarding a plane named the Jasmine. They were from every background, speaking different languages, dressed in suits and saris and sweatpants, and every single one was treated like they belonged. As she watched the plane ascend through the clouds, she whispered the words she once feared she'd never say out loud. "We didn't just change policy, we changed the altitude." What struck me most about Avery's journey wasn't just the takedown of a corrupt system, it was the way she transformed pain into purpose. Some might argue she should have played it quieter, negotiated behind closed doors, or walked away once she proved her point. But change doesn't come from comfort, it comes from choosing courage even when you've been betrayed. If you felt something from this story, whether anger, hope, or reflection, let us know. Drop a comment, share your thoughts, or tag someone who needs to hear this. And most importantly, follow Justice Stories for more. We're just getting started.